Hi, everybody. Hopefully we'll keep you entertained for the next 50 or 90 minutes. 90 minutes? No, maybe 50. So we have, to my left, I've got Christina Dunbar, who's with Pantasia, Ryan Flum, who's with Von Church, BJ Bigley from Prime Candidate, Christine Cicchi from EA, and Casey Manning from Cicchi. And so just to give you a little bit of perspective, so Pantasia is a casino gaming focused company doing a lot of iGaming work. Von Church also is an outside and external recruiting company, also focusing particularly on iGaming. Prime Candidate, which is BJ's company, which is a general recruiting company that works specifically with a lot of game companies. I also worked with BJ recently at a startup in Southern California called NHN Entertainment Labs, which was a social casino studio. And then also we have Christine from EA. Obviously, EA has a lot of gaming products and is an internal recruiter, as is Casey, who works at Cicchi, who's also going to talk with us about the internal recruiting approach. So why do we, when I think of recruiters, the job of dentist also comes up, and people sort of roll their eyes recruiters. It's I hate recruiters. And I've had people other CEOs, and I've been in their offices, they answer the phone, it's don't ever call me again. I don't know why it is, but hopefully today we'll be able to dispel some of these rumors, and maybe you'll show these guys a little love, and they'll show you what they can do for you. And I think that they do provide a very valuable service. We need them like we need our drug dealers and all these other important people in our lives. But they do provide a great drug for us, and I think you'll find some interesting information today. So let's kick this off, and I'm gonna start with our friends who are the internal recruiting companies, so internal recruiters. So my notes here. Do you guys want to explain how an internal recruiting operation works? Just to give this, anyone who wants to take it.
Sure, I can start. So, internal recruiting is somewhat similar to agency recruiting in regards to the process. We're still doing the same amount of outreach. It's very much a sales-focused process. You're canvassing a lot of the market for your needs. That said, internally though, you're focused on your organization solely. You are effectively a representative for your organization or the team, and you are making that direct connection with the candidate to entice them to be a part of your company. Again, I don't see too much difference between the process, say for, I think on our end, the pitch is relatively consistent and stays the same, but we're also able to speak a bit deeper on the long-term opportunities for interested candidates and really deliver a customized experience for them, since we work very closely with the hiring managers and individuals in charge.
How many people at Cicchi in your team?
500 plus for the organization. On my team, 5, including myself.
5, okay. And Christine, how about you? How many people?
So I think EA is at 13,000 now. Within mobile, I think we're about 1,300 or so globally.
And how many people on your team?
So on my team, I'm more of a central group, so I support EA as a global organization, so there's probably 10 of us total, and we're all remote, so we work with all of our global needs. I think, instead of a drug dealer, George, I'd kind of call us connectors. I think that, everyone in this room, if you don't know a recruiter that's internal at a company, you should. And LinkedIn makes it so easy, and just making sure that you know what you want to do and where you want to be, and that's our job, is to make sure if there's someone we want to have at our company, we continue to keep that happening. And externally on your side, it's the same thing. It's being the connector. And so we need to be everywhere. We need to make sure we know top 25 games and who the players are and where they're going in the process, and following them through their career. And on the internal side, making sure our hiring managers know who those people are. That's our job.
Great. Ryan, do you want to explain how an external recruiting service works?
Sure, thank you. I would say with us, we're not as immediate as we are passive recruiters and relationship builders. chances are the person you're talking to isn't going to be a perfect fit for the role you have open at that given time. Maybe they don't want that company size. Maybe the location isn't perfect. Maybe the budget isn't right. But what we do is when we make connection with the candidate, we'll fully qualify them and figure out what is exactly they'll be looking for in their future job. We'll make an ideal situation. And finding those passive candidates who aren't necessarily actively looking are going to be the most placeable candidates later on. So when a client comes to us and says they're looking for a very specific candidate, we have a full database full of people that if they're a perfect fit for what they're looking for, and that opportunity just happens to be the right role that will entice them to make that move, that'll be the most attractive candidate. So I'll say that from the agency side, it's not as much as immediate placements as it is long-term relationship building and finding the ideal situation for those candidates.
Okay. Christina, so who do you work with? You work with the CEO? Do you work with the guys at the other end of the chairs, the internal recruiters? Do you approach them? Do they approach you? How does that all work?
Yes, so I think we run the gamut. We love to work with internal recruiters because it's a partnership. We're not here to compete with filling a position. We're here to assist the organization. Sometimes, depending on the size of the organization, it is the CEO. It is directly talking to the CEO and presenting a candidate that is going to fit what they need for their future growth. But to kind of go back to what Casey was saying about the processes being the same, for some specific job filling, it is the same. But the difference lies in being internal. I was an internal recruiter with MGM and ASAP in Las Vegas, and you can't easily be an internal employee and call your competitor and poach from your competitor. And so from the external side, I think that we can do more of an active headhunt, like Ryan said, finding the passive candidates that are going to be who you're looking for because they're happy and they're good at what they do.
Okay. So how much? BJ, what are the fees?
For you?
I'm not going to ask you to renegotiate your fees, but what's the cost?
It's all kind of relative. Typically, 20%, the 20% solution. That was the name of the talk. We work with different clients to try and give them a package that suits their needs.
Put your microphone up. You can hear you.
We do everything from retained search to contingency search. So 20%, that would be a standard contingency
So explain
search.
the difference between those two kind of searches.
So retained search would mean more of a payment through the process. It gives you more of a vested interest in our search rather than a straight contained where it's only payment to us for success. So
I need a new lead game designer for my casino game.
Okay.
So how much? So retained search. How much? Is that like a retainer every month? Is it like 5,000? How like what's the average?
Once again, it's going to depend on the situation. So every client's different. I'm not going to give you.
You're
a straight
not leaving
answer.
here until you give me a number. We have all day. About.
Yeah, it just.
Is it a percentage of that person's
most
ultimate
likely,
salary?
Yeah, it typically is going to break down to that. What we typically do, we'll give some sort of incentive for giving money through the process rather than just at the back end. So we'll try and give you a discount, let's call it.
So to be 15% of the salary,
Not necessarily.
10% of the salary.
Let's call it a sliding scale, depending on our client and where they are. A lot of times we're going to be dealing with a younger client, right, or a younger in their business or in their product, and they don't necessarily have everything, right? So if they're going to invest in us, we'll invest in them, and we'll help them.
Okay, Ryan, what's your experience in terms of you can do specifics if you want.
Well, we're contingency based, but George, it's not how much it costs to make a placement for us. It's how much does it cost to not make a placement at all.
Wow, that's beautiful.
But I mean, I think that's a true thing. You know, I think that's what we can really provide is that fast-moving placement based on the candidates that we do have those pre-existing relationships with. So in a way, I wouldn't think of it as much as how much does this one payment cost. It's if I don't fill this role in 2 months, how much money am I wasting by not getting my project going? And that's kind of the way I would personally look at it.
Okay. Yes, you may.
Thanks. So I look at retained and contingent somewhat similarly, but on the retained side, so you are paying as you go. The fee is going to stay the same. So whatever we agree the fee is per the person's base salary, it's just paid over time. And the reason that we want to do it retained is because we're going to give you information that you wouldn't get in the contingent search process. So a contingent search is more of your active candidates that are out there that are kind of going to fit the mold, where a retained search is essentially paying for that exclusive amount of time that you're getting. You're getting a dedicated consultant on that search, getting market research, who's your competitors, who do you want to target, who do you think is going to be a best fit for this job. We're going to go out there, we're going to tell you why they said no, so you can have that information as to, is this the best way for me to fill my position?
So if I'm looking for a C-level executive or a GM, that's what you would recommend.
And especially on those searches, sometimes those come very confidentially. You certainly aren't going to post them. You don't want the incumbent to know that maybe they're up for replacement. So obviously it takes a level of tact, and a retained search kind of allows us to do that with some freedom and having the payments along the way.
Okay.
Question based on that.
Okay.
For the other external recruiters, when you have these C-level and GM and VP type of positions, do you find that you have a lack of candidates or a surplus of candidates for those type of roles, just off the bat?
So executive search is kind of our forte. So people come to us all the time. I would say I have a surplus of C-level, high-level people above the line. Yeah.
Because it just seems to me when you get a role like that, chances are you haven't had a lot of opportunities to place those really high-level candidates. These 200,000 plus individuals, which at any given time there isn't really a surplus of open roles for. So when we have a client that actually needs someone like that, a GM or a VP, we actually have pretty quick coverage usually on those type of positions, just because they're pretty rare and there's a lot more candidates than there are open positions.
Okay. Well, hold on. Well, go ahead.
Just typically those high-level folks are always looking.
Yeah.
Just wherever they are.
Yeah.
Not always looking, open.
They're always looking.
Christine, at what point should you're growing? You're not EA yet. We're a new company. We're the Las Vegas Whaling Company. We're a growing company. At what point do I think about setting up an internal recruiting operation?
Good question. I think it depends on how quickly you want to grow. I know that when I joined IGT, they didn't have an internal recruiter that was based there. They worked with an external recruiter that was helping them fill positions on contingency. And so having the person on site, it's bringing the culture together. It's not the HR piece. It's saying, what do you want to see in your employees? How do you want them to perform? How do you want them to act, walk like a duck, quack like a duck? We need to know what you're looking for to grow your team. So if you're going to be hiring 5 people in the next year, and then you can pay BJ or Ryan or Christina to go find them, is that going to pay for my salary? Well, you could probably do a better job hiring them externally. It's going to be faster. But if you want to grow the culture and hire like 100 people in the next 2 years, having that internal recruiter there makes sense. And then they can manage the relationships with the external recruiters too.
Because you'll need us.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So Casey, let's talk about managing the relationships with external recruiters. Do you guys work with these guys, or what's the thinking there? Is it like, let's try to do everything internally, we don't want to use any of these guys, or do you go out to them?
Yeah, it really depends on how you're scaling the business at that particular point in time. Like, I know BJ and I have worked together, and I have a pretty strong team internally, and we've built it to be as such. We're very flexible and can adjust to the needs of the organization. But say if we decide, okay, we're going to hire 200 people this year. Like, I know the metrics by which my team can perform and maximize, and once we hit that inflection point, then I reach out to BJ and my other partners in the industry and kind of give them the game plan for what we need. And that helps us accelerate, really. So it's a partnership which is really flexible but very effective for everyone involved, because I can give them a heads up, to give them enough time to build their database. We coordinate on the candidates we've already seen and maybe people that we've missed, and execute against the plan. But at no means is it a totally cut off situation, but more of a, hey, we don't need you now, but let's stay in touch and let's make sure we work together to grow not only our business, but just the industry as a whole.
Okay. All right, Ryan, what happens when we have a flame out? Somebody doesn't work out, they've been working at the company for 3 weeks, and it's just like, this person is not right. We did not get the right person. What happens? What's the fallback? What are the remedies?
Well,
That never happens, but
never ever happens. Fortunately, in my experiences, it doesn't happen that much. I mean, I think that it kind of goes two ways. I think, an external recruiter is an easy scapegoat in that situation. You can point fingers, this is your fault. But chances are that there's something went wrong in the vetting process. Maybe the client didn't take long enough to, really learn about this candidate. If this was a good person culturally or technically, if this person just really didn't fit in, or if this person was just taking this job in the interim so they could maybe keep on interviewing or something like that. On the flip side of things, there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong on our end. We didn't ask the right questions. We gave them the wrong information. They were coming into a completely different situation than it actually turned out to be. So when that type of thing happens, I think that both the client and the recruiting firm, need to talk to one another and see where the disconnect was. Obviously, after we speak with the candidate, and then we both kind of have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, where do we mess up, and where can we get better, and make sure this never happens again. I always think that in staffing, it's an ever-evolving thing, and mistakes will be made. But if you don't learn from them, you're going to fail as a recruiter. But if you can take every failure and evolve with it and learn from it, sometimes a situation like George described can actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. Just take the learning lesson and become a better recruiter because of it.
So, Christine, okay. So,
and probably don't work with that candidate ever again in some circumstances.
Christina, so how do you as a CEO or GM or I need my new game designer. How do you've come up with a couple resumes from me. What's the process that we go through to actually recruit this person and to work with you? You sending me over? We're shipping people out to meet with us. That can get expensive if they're from out of town. How does that process all work?
So I think it depends on which way we decide to go. If we are on a retained search or are we on a contingent search. Depends on how many people you're going to get at one time.
Specifics.
Retained search, we're going to set an agreement of I want to see 5, 10 resumes at a time. I want to see, 5 final interviews. The whole process is negotiated with the client. So every client, like Ryan said, is different in their process. I think that, we really need to sit down and determine what it is that you're looking for. I know I spend a lot of time with my clients just finding out who the hiring manager is and what that personality consists of, and it's kind of like matchmaking. So it can't just be good on paper. It has to make sense all the way around. It has to be the right opportunity for the candidate. It has to make sense as a move in their career. And then on the organization side, it has to be a good fit for your overall culture. If you're a small company like, out here in San Francisco, every person that is there matters. And so if there's some personality like bad fit, it won't work all the way around, no matter how good they were on paper.
Okay, so speaking of that, and this is a question I'll just sort of throw out to everybody, how important is it to do an in-person meeting? Because also sometimes, like, you may have a great candidate, and we dealt with this at our company. We were in San Francisco, but we were in LA. We were a startup, but there were people that were in Chicago that we wanted to get. It was going to cost us, over $1,000 to ship them out for an interview, and it gets expensive if you're a startup, and it's a tough choice to make. But how crucial is that to the decision to bring them out? You guys have more money than God, so you can do whatever you want. But the average.
Sure, everybody has a budget, right? Everybody has a number. But with the in-person experience, we're lucky enough to be, in an age where there's so many opportunities to get as close to that experience as possible before making that investment to bring someone out, right? Skype is free. A lot of startups use Skype. You do video con calls. You can basically do whiteboarding with engineers, in their house, or if they, are able to find a location that they're able to, show how they develop code and how they think through a problem with the potential engineers they're going to be working with. Or if you're looking for product managers, there are multiple ways where you can engage a candidate and understand their thought process before you make and it's less about the investment of, the cost of a flight or a hotel, but more about the time investment from your team. Does your team have the ability to spend 6 hours of their day to vet a candidate? And at the end of that, if they don't work out, they're coming yelling at us saying, how do we miss this? How do we not know that this was kind of a guarantee, right? And that's really where we put the focus on the investment. Is it worth our team's time to engage with this individual? And it's our job to ensure that the team wants to hire this person before they show up at our front door. The in-person really should be the last kind of gut check moment. But up until that point, you do everything you can to make sure, yes, this is absolutely worth everybody's time and interest to make this happen.
Talk a little bit more, because it sounds interesting, about like a highly technical role, a senior VP of engineering, somebody, it's like, I want a new Unity developer. You were mentioning doing something where you put up a whiteboard and you're doing as a VTC. Explain that process.
So there are a lot of free tools and technologies you can use. Some we've investigated, some we haven't, but we have a pretty straightforward process. Depending on the candidate, if there is a code test they're able to participate in, prior to the initial interview, it kind of does two things, right? It shows the interest of the candidate. I know there are a lot of people who are super busy out there, and there are plenty of candidates who will say, I'm way too busy to take a take-home test. We found that the best candidates are that interested in the role to where they're going to do it anyway. And it's a very easy discussion if you illustrate that this is a great opportunity, we think it's a perfect fit for you. We need you to make that investment. It's free except for time, and I understand time is valuable, but we generally find the most passionate developers we have take on that challenge because it's a mutual agreement of future success. And that's a huge gate in the process that's really easy to engage in. And it's very easy to walk away from too. If a candidate says, I don't have the time, then you illustrate how this might slow down the process or what the consideration is, and you agree to disagree until a time that's better. Or most of the time, a candidate is very engaged and moves forward, and things work out pretty well.
Christina, are you guys also doing code tests and all that, and how does that work for EA?
Absolutely. It depends on the team. If we have a test, you have to give it to everybody. That's kind of HR law, right? So we do the phone screens. We usually screen them first, make sure there's interest. If there is, then they kind of go through a battery of other phone calls so that technically they're on the mark. They have the test done. If it's an art test or if it's a programming test, depends. When it comes to executive hires, it's a little bit different because there's so many people that they affect. So we try to make sure that they get to talk to as many people as possible. And then inviting them in, it is just kind of sealing the deal, making sure that they feel like they want to be a part of the culture. So before someone walks in from, let's say we're hiring for Shanghai and they're based in Redwood City. Well, we're in Redwood City, that's perfect, but I got to get him to Shanghai and make sure that he has buy-in from that team. So you get buy-in here, you make sure that they're sold on it, and then you can start looking at the cost of what it's really going to be.
Do you do a Skype call for Shanghai, or do you send them there?
I'll do a Skype call, but to make the final decision, we'll have them meet. We won't make the decision on Skype, but we, like George says, we have a lot of money. I'm just kidding.
They admitted it.
Just kidding.
Okay, so let's talk, continuing in that vetting process, references, and how important are references, and sort of like what are the do's and don'ts on references, because I understand there's certain things you can't call and you can't ask for references on certain people. BJ, since you got the microphone in your hand, you can start, and everybody else can jump in because it's a very interesting topic.
I mean, as an external recruiter, we've been asked to do reference checks on candidates all the time, but it's not like a proper background check. It's mostly just a character reference check.
Okay.
And it's basically just as if they listed professional references on their resume.
Okay. Casey, what's the deal on references? Are you allowed to get references?
Yeah, absolutely. You check references on everyone, if at all possible. And really what it comes down to is, California is an at-will state, and maybe I'm pulling back the proverbial red curtain a bit too much. But ultimately, the reference check is there as a gate for the organization to protect themselves. Really at the state of where someone's accepted an offer, they agreed in principle to become an employee of your company, and the reference check is there for you to do a character reference to ensure that what they committed to you during the interview process is legitimate. And you can call other references, and each reference can say, I don't feel comfortable giving a reference for this person, and it's your decision at that point. I mean, if I call someone's references, they list 5 people that they trust enough to give them the character reference and they refuse to, then that's a decision myself or my hiring manager needs to make, or the company has to make of, are we going to take this risk on this individual if no one externally will vouch for them? People they've chosen won't vouch for them. Then you're generally going to walk away. But
What point are you doing the reference check?
Generally after I actually ask the candidate when I'm allowed to check the references. I leave it up to them.
So you check with them first, say, may I call these people?
Oh, absolutely. I would not go behind
Everybody?
the candidate's back.
General?
I mean, some people might, you've heard of it happening, but it generally goes very badly for the recruiter and it damages your reputation because you're putting them at risk.
Can I get a reference from EA? If I want to hire somebody who worked at EA, will you guys give references out?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't been told not to specifically.
Some people there are some companies you call and say, I'm sorry, it is our policy not to give references.
Well, internally, a company can only give so much information. So on a job application, those references that are listed from that candidate are going to be people that are going to sing their praises. Candidates know better than to list a reference that would be a bad reference. And there is no such thing as a bad reference because legally, if this person has worked for you, you can't say anything negative about the person. You can verify dates of employment, what the position was, and what the wage was. And
what about if they were just terrible?
Legally, you can't say
can't.
that. On an internal side, legally, you can't say that. So and plugging the external recruitment team here, this is another great reason for high-level positions why you want to use an external recruiter. Yes, your internal team is going to do reference checks, but we're going to do additional reference checks. And when we ask for references, we can ask, I would like to speak to somebody that you worked for, somebody that worked for you, somebody that you worked alongside of, a vendor. We can get a varied level of references, and we can ask more candid questions because of the legality issues that we're just allowed to ask
Can
more
you
questions.
let's say I give you 5 references. Can you say I want to talk to people he hasn't listed. I see all these people on LinkedIn that they're connected with. Do I know? Can you just call them up? And do you do that?
It happens in the industry all the time. It even happens internally with the companies. Hey, this guy worked over here. Didn't you work over there? Can you call somebody and see, how it worked out? I mean, essentially, you can get information that way, but it's really hard to make a hiring decision based on that information because it was
Go
a
ahead.
tape.
So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Don't ever burn a bridge. That's all I'm saying.
What do you mean?
So I would recommend never putting a reference down that that person's going to be a poor reference. But if EA's 13,000 people. It's possible that you've worked with someone at our company. So if you have, maybe make a mention, and that's always one of our interview questions. Do you know anyone who works here? Do you know anyone who used to work here? Right. What's your opinion on us? There's lots of fun things you can learn about someone, but people talk. That's just the human way, and we want to make sure the cultures match. So I'm not going to write down who said what and then give it back to the employee that we're trying to hire because they can go sue the company in which that said that. That's why we're never supposed to really give a reference. So always do your best. Make sure you don't leave in a bad way. Always try to make things a little bit better if there was a bad situation because if that reference comes back, you want to have a reason for why it happened. Things happen.
What's the most important thing that you look at? Is it the CV or is it the LinkedIn profile or something else? When you're looking at new people.
So for me, I know that when I'm going after an executive, and I've had to hire GMs and executive producers and CTOs, and I look at their LinkedIn profiles. That's easy. It's right there. But I also do what kind of interviews have they done? What are some stories that they may have said or what's been out there? And it's very interesting what you can find. There's lots of fun stories in the game industry specifically of things that went, wow, that went wrong. So it's a great opener, like, oh, I read about that article that you did. But it's also when you're looking at executive hires or trying to find people, their LinkedIn is great, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So you want to be able to know the person, especially when you're reaching out to them passively. And getting to know them and seeing if they're going to be a right match. So LinkedIn's great because it just shows who you are, who you follow. And that's another thing. If you want a job at a company, follow the company. Know about the company. I'm just saying. Even if you're being recruited.
Do you check that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I want them to know who we are. And some people, well, most people know who EA is, but when I've worked at other companies on the external side or the internal side, you want to know that they are interested. When I hired for IGT, do you know who IGT is? Well, you can Google IGT. Yeah. They're kind of big in the casino side, but do you know who they are? Do you know the players? That's important to me as a recruiter to hire you in on the internal side. Why do you want to work here? It's not just oh yeah, Monster had a job opening and I applied. Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Oh.
It's like not needed.
Casey, what about it? Should your resume match your LinkedIn page exactly? If you notice, it's like, that's weird. That's like, I know something doesn't match there.
It depends. It doesn't really matter to me necessarily. Generally, it depends on the candidate. You know, sometimes they lead with their LinkedIn profile. Sometimes their LinkedIn profile is completely accurate with everything that they're doing, you know, as of yesterday. And others aren't on LinkedIn. They have a LinkedIn profile for networking purposes, but they don't want all of their experience out there. So you have to have the conversation, and it's an easy conversation. I generally ask, you know, which is the best representation of your background? Which would you prefer me to lead with? Your LinkedIn profile or your resume? And we kind of run from there.
Okay. All right, let's talk about, again, we're going back to the Las Vegas Whaling Company. We're a real company, but just sort of using this, it's a good name. BJ, BJ and I just did this, so I'm going to ask you to talk about your experience at NHN in setting up a brand new company from scratch and setting up all the systems. So it's like JobVite, you know, these recruiting systems. We build it into the website. Like someone out there, I don't know if anybody's starting up a startup, what do you do?
Right, so first, obviously, you have to
How much is it going to cost? We need to know numbers. That's really important to me.
half your paycheck. Okay. First, you're going to start up by setting up a game plan, figuring out what your strategy, basically, where you want to hit for what and why. I basically go and break it down. What tools are going to be the most valuable for your hires? You know, obviously there's LinkedIn, and are you going to get a LinkedIn recruiter seat, which is extremely expensive, and then you're going to go negotiate with them to try and get the best deal. Things like that. JobVite, JobScore, you know, which one? It's typically just.
What do you recommend? Just go through.
I like JobVite, but it's typically just a personal preference. They all kind of do the same thing, right? I mean.
What do you guys use?
I prefer JobVite, honestly. I think it gives you the best value and the most expansive tools out there, really.
Anybody else?
We have an internal system. It's an MGP,
Oh, wow.
and then we have some other fun things too. But externally, we use LinkedIn and Connectifier and Talent Bin, whatever we can use. I mean, we have access to everything because of our size, and depending on the location, we can really try anything because people like to have our business since we're so big. So it's nice that they give us a chance to try them out. I mean, we've done the monsters, we've done, you know, JobVites. We try a little bit of everything to see what's the most successful. So we try a little bit of everything.
Okay, Ryan. Let's we have a few minutes left. Let's sort of. How is it? I just lost my job. How do I get hired again? And how do I get, you know, your attention?
Well, first of all,
I lost my job 2 ways. I lost my job because they laid off our division, and I lost my job because I did a crummy job.
Right. So chances are, if you're reaching out to me directly after you lost your job, we've probably worked together in the past, either on networking or on job hunts before. My first question to you would be, what happened? You know, and then I would get your end of the story. And if it turned out that, you know, you got laid off, that's always a pretty acceptable circumstance. And sometimes these even happen after 1 month of working at a place. You know, we've seen that happen before. So what we do when we submit all of our candidates to our clients is that we write a little bit of a write-up that we call a sizzle that will include some, you know, highlights about the candidate, maybe some things that aren't necessarily on the resume, and if they've had a little bit of jumpiness in their resume, which is generally speaking a red flag, we'll outline for the client off the bat the reasons why they left those companies. And that way we kind of beat them to the objection, and then the client can't make any assumptions. You know, if the person got laid off, they can't look at that resume and say, oh, 8 months, 6 months, 7 months, you know, this person obviously isn't a loyal candidate. We can counter that objection on the candidate's behalf before, you know, the client has any time to worry about it. If they got fired, I would probably figure out the circumstances in which they got fired. And I think it's up to myself to make the most well-informed decision as to whether or not I want to present this candidate to my client. It works both ways. I have to represent my client in the same way that I represent my candidates. And if this person is going to be someone who's going to jeopardize my client's organization, it's up to me to decide whether or not I want to present that person.
Casey, do you hire people that get fired?
Did you ask, do we hire people to get fired?
No, you've hired people that have gotten your experiences and, hired people that, got fired from their job because they didn't do their job till last time.
Absolutely. And especially in the game industry, it's such a project-driven business. It depending on which direction the project shifts, a person might not be a good fit anymore. Like you think, especially if they're creative focused and the project shifts to creative focus and their skills are you just can't utilize them as the project moves forward and they get let go. It's understandable. Again, it's about investigating the story and hearing their side of the story, and then if they move through the process and you check their references and those stories match up, it's not an issue. So you would not just reject somebody outright because they said they got laid off unless you knew why somehow and then you avoid it.
So I don't know if there's more candidates in this room or clients in this room, but I think everybody can be on one side or the other at any given time. So please take this message outside of this panel. Let's not wait till that happens to connect. Let's build these relationships now. That's when you're going to have the best strategic partner in a recruiter. I mean, yes.
When you're employed.
When you're employed, or when you don't think you need a job, you could be perfectly happy doing what you're doing. And if you wanted to tell me that the job you're doing now is the job you're going to do for the next 25 years, barring no external circumstances, then that's great. But you don't know what's out there if you're not open to it. So just make the connections. That's kind of what we're here for. We want to introduce these opportunities. It might be something that you never even knew that you wanted. Like when I went from internal HR recruiting to being an executive casino host for operations, I had no idea that I was ever going to spend the next 6 years of my life doing that. But it was just an opportunity that I was open to. And so it's kind of what I'm asking on that side as well.
Yeah, maybe everybody takes. So how do I, as a candidate, let's say I am gainfully employed already, how do I get in touch with you to say, hey, by the way, maybe next year I may be looking for a job, I don't know. Because sometimes it's hard. I mean, it's like email's going to bounce. I can't necessarily, maybe I don't have your email directly. There's no job specific on JobVite as opposed to like a very specific, there's not a specific job I'm applying for. I just want you to know about me.
In my experiences, that doesn't happen all that often if you're gainfully employed and passive. Generally speaking, we're going to have to open the door to that relationship. But there are people who are very talented and not looking to move at all who do understand the value in having a relationship with a recruiter, whether it's in 5 months or 2 years. So chances are they'll let us know, hey, I'm not looking for anything, I'm happy right now, but maybe there's a chance I'll be looking in a year, let's set up a conversation. So, we'll talk to them, qualify them, build up that relationship, and then it's up to us to make sure that we keep those connections fresh and we're reaching out to this person, even once to every 2 months just to build that rapport and make sure the relationship's strong. Then if you've, established their trust, then they'll come back to you and say, hey, Ryan, I'm ready to start looking around. And then the candidate went from being a passive candidate to an active candidate, and you can see if you have any appropriate jobs for that person.
Anybody else on that?
Yeah, well, so typically for me, like, I reach out to all kinds of people, but I have a lot of people come to me, and a lot of people come from referrals. I typically tell people, give me lead time if you're looking for work, and the best way to communicate with a recruiter is not just pick up the phone and call them usually. I know a lot of them do that to you, but the best way to get in touch with them is via email. Give them a chance to schedule a time with you that is mutually agreeable. For me, and our company, we're all about the long-term relationships, and we have long-term relationships with our clients and our companies, and we like to help people as well. So it's all about making the right move for the candidate, and we try and help people do that. And I think helping people is why we all do what we do.
How do I get in the door of EA?
I'm sorry.
How do we get in?
link in with me, talk to me, reach
You'll
out.
take a LinkedIn
Absolutely.
invite from somebody who.
Absolutely. I always accept LinkedIn, but they may not reach out to me and say, hey, I want this job, but sometimes they do. My email address is on my LinkedIn page. You can email me directly. You don't even need to link in with me.
Okay.
And if I saw a job and I'm really interested in it, and I'll take a look at their profile, and if, they don't match, I'll say, gosh, you don't match. Well, why do you think you are a good fit? And they might tell me 20 things that aren't on their LinkedIn profile or on their resume that they've done, more on the passive side, and they could be a match. So I have no problem introducing anyone to any job that's on our site. And if it's really a good match, I'll interview them and take the time and introduce them to the right people. So we have that. But it's making friends with recruiters and talented people within companies that you want to work is the key towards where you want to go. And introducing yourself and really developing relationships with recruiters that you work internally, like with BJ and with all of you, if you're placing, making those strong relationships throughout your career is so important, because you never know when you're going to be without a job. You just don't, because you don't know what the reporting is going to be like. EA's is really good, so if you want to work at EA, you can send me a note. But it's an exciting time, but it's also a scary time. So I think always being ready, making sure that your LinkedIn has kind of a skeleton of what you've done and what you've been a part of, but then also have your resume always kind of ready to be updated, either when you all call them or when we're ready to hire you. I think it's important. Keep those relationships up.
Okay, last question. The crazy video. Was
The video.
it worth it? And to tell these guys really briefly what it was, and did it pay for you guys?
So Kickstarter released a video in August of 2012 before I joined that really put us on the map. You can look it up on YouTube. It's fantastic. So at the time the video was released, Kickstarter had about 180 employees. By the summer of 2013, we had close to 500. So the video did a lot for us. It says, we're here and we're talented and we want you to be a part of it. And that was great for us.
How much did it cost to produce?
I don't have the exact numbers, but it definitely paid for itself many times over.
5,000?
More than that, I know. Less than a
10,000.
billion. More than 100, less than a billion, but
All right, it cost them 15,000. All right, anybody have any questions? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions.
Okay.
Exclusivity. So I've got 3 jobs I need to hire for. Can I get all 3 of you guys going for it, or are you going to lock me into an exclusive deal? Because I'd rather have all 3 of you out on contingent searches trying to hire C-levels for me. Is that loud enough?
I'm sure all of us would work on a contingent search if we qualify the jobs with you. So, I mean, we have to figure out that it's mutually beneficial to us as well. So it has to be worth our time to work it contingently.
Is it exclusive? Can I work with Ryan and can I work with you all at the same time?
So isn't that... No, so you don't have to work exclusively with any one of us, and that's really how the contingent search works. Retained searches work that way as well. You don't have to work exclusively with one company for a retained search, but since you're paying somebody, you're probably only going to work for one. Anybody? Oh.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice?
Let's meet in the
Okay.
back, by the way.
Thank you, guys. Very good panel.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.